Segment of the show for today. The topic is Facing Adversity, the Civil Rights Movement in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're talking to Professor Gloria McKissack. And of course, Professor McKissack, we promised that we'd give you an opportunity to talk about some of the most notable characters that you might have met during the Civil Rights Movement here in Nashville. And I think that you indicated that you knew both Dr. King and his wife. Why don't you talk about those individuals and how you met them within the range of the Civil Rights Movement?
Okay, well, there were a number of people that I met at that time, but living in the moment, I didn't know their historical significance, and they became icons in the movement. Dr. Bernard Lafayette, for example, is a good friend of mine today. John Lewis was active in the movement. Of course, he's a congressman now. So they were just other students, just like, you know, myself. The movement brought a lot of important people to Nashville. Some I was conscious of their importance. I remember when Sidney Poitier came to Nashville to support the movement, and I got to meet him and talk to him. He was very personable. And Ralph Abernathy and Stokey Carmichael. I belong to SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I still have my pen. So I came in contact with those people. Martin Luther King, I was involved in the march in Detroit, which preceded the Great March in Washington, D.C. in 1963. And thousands of people marched down Woodward Avenue to the Riverfront Cobo Hall to hear King speak. And you couldn't get inside of the place, and we were on the lawn trying to hear him. And I remember so distinctly Dr. King saying, "I have a dream, I have a dream." I couldn't make out much more, but I heard, "I have a dream." And of course, later in my studies and time, I realized that he gave that speech prior to his Washington speech. And when he was in Washington, he was giving this speech, and someone kept prompting him in the background, tell him about the dream, tell him about the dream, because he hadn't even planned to say that. So his real "I have a dream" speech was actually said in Detroit, Michigan, and I wonder what would be the significance of the speech and so forth if he had never said it in Washington, D.C. But I remember that very clearly. My contact with Coretta Scott King came many years later. I was selected to represent the state of Tennessee and work at the Martin Luther King Center for Social Change in Atlanta. They selected one educator, or sometimes two, from each state, and I was the one from Tennessee. And I worked with Mrs. King and his sister, Christina King, and others to develop a national curriculum guide based on his strategies and his philosophy for nonviolence. So I had close contact with her. I remember when she came in the room, and we were in her board room, and she walked in there, and it was just like an angel had appeared. She just had such a charismatic, she's just a beautiful woman. And so I worked on that curriculum guide there, and went back several times to develop that guide.
So Dr. Lewis Baldwin, of course you know Dr. Baldwin, mentioned this curriculum, I think, on a number of occasions when we had him on the show. And so you actually participated in helping to build this civil rights kind of curriculum that Dr. King, that I think was pushed all across the nation.
Yes, it was a national curriculum, and when I came back to Nashville, I used to give workshops on Keynesian nonviolence and introduce that into the metro school system, and it became a very intricate part of my teaching. Every student I had to learn the steps for conflict resolution, and I bet if you met one today, they'd be able to give you those steps and how to use them.
That was a very, very important part